What is up, Nole Nation? It's the guys from Plant the Spear here to digest everything we saw this past weekend, Michael. We're going to kind of put a wrap on 2023, turn a little bit of our focus towards 2024 in an episode that we're going to title Turning the Page. The Florida State's 2023 season is officially in the books. It is over and done with. We got some news on 2024 to turn our focus to. But I feel like we're just going to kind of digest everything that we saw this past weekend and just kind of put a bow on that, kind of bury it. We're going to have 2 episodes coming up as well outside of this, where we're going to go back and really just kind of enjoy what 2023 was, even the way it ended. And we're also going to have one where we do a way too early look at 2024. So if we don't get into everything, that's why. But Michael, we're just going to kind of you got to talk about it at some point, my man. So
right.
it wasn't how we wanted it to go. The season didn't end the way we wanted to, but there's so much packaged in what happened in 23 and what's already going on for 2024 and some of these moves that we're just going to kind of digest all of it. So thank you for joining me. And, thanks for opting into this one because, man, it was that was a disappointing weekend. I know you were there. You actually were at the game. I'm
Right.
sorry. I watched it with a bunch of Georgia fans, so it probably wasn't much more
I'm
fun,
sorry
but
for you.
Man, it is what it is. It's not the first time I've been barked at by a grown adult. So,
You know what? Thanks for having me. Always, I love being a part of Plant the Spear. First of all, just a little fact. I was in the Florida State section of the arena, so I didn't really get barked at. But for the most part, I think Georgia fans may have felt a lot of very bad for us, and so they were actually pretty kind on their way out of the stadium there. But it. Listen, it 63-3 wasn't expected. We didn't predict that, but I think in my prediction, I said 45-3, and I was just a few points off there. But this was
only
to be
too bad that was the first half score.
exactly. It was. You're so right. You're so right. I did not. I think I texted you. I was like, I did not expect them to hit my prediction in the first half.
Right.
But listen. It was to be expected that this was going to be a blowout, especially when we found out, right before the game that Braden Fisk and some of those other guys that had been projected to play did not end up playing in that game. And what you saw was the depth of Georgia, against the depletedness of Florida State. And if you're watching this as a Nole fan, here's the thing: we're Nole blooded. We'll always be Nole fans. You're never going to stop us from cheering for the Noles. But yeah, that game was hard to watch. It was sad to be a part of, but this is not indicative of this program. It's not indicative of this coaching staff. And we here at Plant the Spear, we trust and we believe the climb that's still happening in this program. But to say the same thing as that was very disappointing.
Yeah, I was fortunate when watching it with the Georgia fans because they got their shots in early and then they got bored. So
Yeah,
they just went and found something else to do and they kind of left me alone. So it was easy that way.
it's easy.
But yeah, man, I mean, like just talking about the game because it did happen. So we'll talk about it a little
Right.
bit. I mean, hey, you set a record for the worst bowl loss
That's
of
right.
all bowls ever. That's not the way you exactly want to end a 13-0 season, but I've defended this on social media 5,000 times. Anybody with a brain knows that game was so lopsided with
Yep.
starts and experience and players out and everything like that. That game would have been completely different had you have had your starters because I mean, let's be honest, man. Look at what Georgia did against Georgia Tech. They had one starter out, Brock
Yeah.
Bowers, and they won 31-23.
That's
Florida
right.
State had 15 starters out. Like, that's hard for anybody to
Right.
overcome.
That's right.
And then not only that, but once you had those 15 starters out, you also lost your best receiver.
That's right.
Portier only played 15 snaps. And Fentrell Cypress also, I believe, got banged up in the game as well and only played 20 snaps out of
That's right.
78 snaps. So you really kind of lost 2 of your better guys throughout the game. So essentially, you're almost at 17 starters out. And, my thing is, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Florida State could have beat Georgia in that situation
Right.
because Kirby obviously he pulled up, could have probably been 100-3 if he wanted it to.
Pretty
But I
close.
will say, like, man, when you see the beginning of that game and you saw those guys that did not play that we thought we were under the expectations that they were going to play, when you look at Fisk, Farmer, and Bethune, those 3 alone, I think, and I know this sounds like I might be reaching here, but may have cut 20 points off the score because
Yeah.
you just had nothing up front. I mean, you had Daryl Jackson come back, hasn't played a game in a year. So, I mean, did you really expect him to go be dominant? We thought he'd be
Right.
he thought he would be a great number 2 coming in off the bench. But the problem was you couldn't stop the run. You couldn't get pressure because you had such a depleted defensive line. And to me,
That's
that was
right.
really just the story of the game. You felt like if you had Fisk and Farmer, there's you a good 1 and 2, and then you could bring in some guys off the bench to keep them fresh. But then when those guys were out, I mean, you just had nothing on defense. You were so down on defense. You had 6 new starters starting on defense for their first game ever. So it's just, man, you were so depleted. That game was never going to be close. But I do think that it tells you to a degree that, we talked about this in pre-show a little bit. You got a little ways to go.
Yeah.
To catch a depth machine like Georgia. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this Florida State. The bowl game is like Florida State was a really good collection of the pieces it had. And that's not to say that teams can't win like that. I mean, Auburn probably doesn't win a title without Cam Newton. Florida probably doesn't win one without Tim Tebow. Florida State was a sum of all its parts, but it's not a depth machine like Georgia is. And there's not many teams that are like that.
That's right.
And so just to kind of put the gravity, now that we saw the starting lineups and just a couple quick numbers here, this is where you start to run into trouble. So when you look at on the offense going up against the Georgia defense, Florida State had 72 combined starts, 2 first-time starters, 4 second-time starters, and 58 of that was on the offensive line.
Oof.
So your skill positions had 14 starts.
Man.
Georgia's defense had a combined 103 starts of experience and only 1 first-time starter. So that was
all you need to know right there.
That was pretty bad. And it got worse on defense with the guys that didn't play. So UGA's offense had 105 combined starts, 0 first-time starters, 1 person who had only started 1 game. Florida State had 55 combined starts on the defense and 6 guys starting their first game this season.
Gosh.
You were just, I mean, you were out of it, man. You were out of it. And then not to like try and find a way that Florida State, that it wasn't a 60-point blowout, because it was. There was so many close things in this game that just didn't go your way on top of being depleted. You had a strip sack that you weren't able to recover. You get the ball inside the 5-yard line. You couldn't get a touchdown. And then, you give up a touchdown, then the drive after that, you fumble the kickoff and you give it right back on a 1-play score. There was like, this game went from being potentially 14-7 with about 10 minutes left in the first half,
right,
to now it was 28-3 within 2 minutes.
That's right.
So it's spiraled, and then people make the thing where like, okay, well, it was 21-0 with Georgia's backups. You also had Florida State's backups who had already been going against your starters for 2.5 quarters at that point. So those guys were not fresh, and you brought in fresh backups off the bench, which, oh, by the way, all of Georgia's backups are 4 and 5 stars.
That's right.
So, I mean, that's just, it's not that, like, again, the game is what it is. We knew it was going to be bad from the beginning. I just think it's important to look at just how outmanned they were, and when you talk about the defensive line, you only got pressure on 21.1% of Carson Beck's dropbacks. You allowed 9.3 sack adjusted yards per carry, and they put up 382 rushing yards sack adjusted. You couldn't stop them up front. So Georgia, that's where Georgia wins games. The trenches are stacked for those guys.
That's right.
And so, and again, man, congrats to Kirby for building a machine of a program. That's great. Right. And there are some positives that we'll talk about in this game, but I think the one thing that people have to keep in mind is when you look at the two situations, Kirby's been at Georgia for 8 years. He didn't come in during the COVID year. Yes, he dealt with it while he was already there, but you already had your culture established.
That's right.
Mike Norvell came into a bad situation. I mean, even when they got rid of Rick, like, they were walking away from a coach that was kind of a hard guy to let go because he had won a lot of 8, 9, 10 game seasons. You just could never win the big one. Florida State came from a different place. You came from multiple consecutive losing seasons. You took over in a COVID year.
Yep.
You're trying to get to where Georgia is, starting from a deeper hole that you're digging out of.
That's right.
And so Mike Norvell, because, and we can kind of divert into this right now, because the one thing that pisses me off about this game more than anything is the people that are taking shots at Florida State's culture.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth on this. Yeah. On the one hand, we just talked about it. Like, Kirby built his program with program guys. They don't use the portal a lot.
That's right.
Again, they weren't digging out of that same hole. Mike Norvell took the transfers to get out of a hole. I mean, what would you rather be? Like, people can talk about it's the transfers that lead to the culture issues. What would you rather have? 13, 14 transfers on your team that opt out of a bowl game, but you went 13-0, or don't take any transfers and go 5-7? I'm
Yep.
taking 13-0 every day, 8 days a week. You can give me that deal. So
That's
Mike
right.
Norvell did what he had to do to get the
Right.
program to the level that it's at. But now I'm going to talk out of the other side of my mouth a little bit. I think you do need to. This shows you need program guys like a
Yeah.
Kalen DeLoach. Even a Malcolm Ray, a guy who's been here for a while, was in the portal and still played. So you have some guys that it means a little bit more to them to stick around to the end because, again, we talked about this in the bowl preview show, and this is a real testy subject here. This is
Yes, it is.
you got to walk a real fine line with this. I'm not calling the players quitters. I'm not saying anything like that because I don't think they quit. It's
Yeah.
their decision to go out and pursue their NFL dreams. It's their health. It's their money. It's not my decision to make. It's not anybody on social media's decision to make.
That's right.
I just felt bad to watch Mike Norvell, the leader of the team, have to go out there and wear a 60-point whipping.
Yeah.
While everyone else just kind of headed for the hills. And I think when you saw the, for what it's worth, epic post-game speech, I think you could tell the opt-outs bothered him a little bit. I think
Yeah.
he felt like some of the guys just picked up their stuff and left. And so, it is what it is. I know he'll never come out and say that. And again, it's the player's decision. It's not mine. But I feel bad for Mike having to go out there and take that beating the way he did.
Yeah, I think you can. I think two things can be true at the same time, right? Is one, you can feel bad. You can not like that the players opted out because of whatever reason, you want to feel. Like I didn't necessarily like that those healthy players who probably weren't top fourth round draft picks, fourth round or higher draft picks, they opted out. I didn't like it. I mean, of course not, man. I would rather them play for, Florida State and try to, at least make the game somewhat, decent. At the same time, the other side that can be true is that those kids, we don't know their stories. We don't know the decisions that they're having to make, the environments and influences that are in their life that are pulling them this and that direction. And so for them to make a choice to protect their future, whatever their future may be, and by not playing in that game, I also understand that too, right? So two things can be true at the same time. Do I also think that Mike Norvell understood why they made the decision they did? Yeah, he did. Do I also think that Mike Norvell didn't like that they made the decision they made? Absolutely. Two things can be true at the same time.
Yep.
And I think like you said, you alluded to in that post-game speech, particularly not the one in the locker room, but the one in the post-game press conference, where he had said that, that some of the players made decisions and as coaches, whether we agree or not, man, our job is to be alongside of them, to care for them and get them, to where they need to ultimately go and things of that nature. And so, yeah, I think for sure it wasn't fun to see some of those players opt out, but you also understood it. Now, is that an indictment that Florida State has a bad culture? Heck no. Because you have to understand, these players were brought here under the premise that if they did everything the coaches asked them to do, they would have a chance to compete for a national championship. They did absolutely everything the coaches asked them to do. They went undefeated. They beat both their rivals again. They won the ACC. They went into Clemson when no school had done that in a long time and beat them. They beat LSU to a pulp. By the way, LSU's long snapper trying to come at Jordan Travis. Boy, we shamed him to death because, boy, your team got owned twice by Florida State. Sit down. Go snap a ball somewhere or something. But they did everything they were asked to do. And then 12 people in a room said, nah, you're not good enough. And so I understand why those players who were, let's just call it what they were, 1-year rentals, said, okay, well, then I'm going to go and get myself ready for the next league because you just told me what I did didn't matter, right? So two things can be true at the same time. It's not indicative of the culture. What is indicative of the culture is those players that played, that showed up, that gave it all they had. That, I mean, you're talking about Kalen DeLoach. Man, kudos to that man. I salute you, Kalen DeLoach. I love you, man. You are an incredible representative of Florida State football. And let me tell you, there are more Kalen DeLoaches on that team. Georgia, one of the things, like you said, like Georgia, the reason why all those players played, well, a lot of the reasons why, think about that. A lot of them were either fourth-year juniors or fifth-year seniors, right? So of course they're going to play their last games for Georgia. But also, like you said, Kirby has had years to build a culture and program there, right? And I imagine that if Kirby was in year 4, like Mike Norvell is, and this had happened to Kirby, you would probably have seen the same thing happen to them at Florida State. But because he's 8 years in, 2 national titles, 7 consecutive top 3 high school
Right.
recruiting classes, like, yeah, of course they're going to show up because he's built that culture. Mike Norvell and Florida State is on the way. That culture is not broken. And for anyone who says it is, you do not know college football. You do not know Florida State football, and you should sit down.
Right. I don't think it's an indictment on the culture by any means, because the reason I say that is because a lot of the guys came back, like you mentioned. They could have went somewhere, at least some of the guys, and I know some
Correct.
people are like, where are they going to go? But some of the guys could have went to the NFL last year. Look at
Yep.
Jared Verse. I mean,
Yep.
he was a first round grade last year, second round
Yep.
grade, whatever. And so he came back to do what you said,
Yep.
try and win a
Yep.
national title. And they did everything that they could have done. I understand Georgia was pissed off too. Is
Yeah.
Georgia probably one of the best 4 teams in the
Yeah.
country? I guarantee you they are.
Yes, they are.
Does beating the thing is, when you say that, does beating our backups by 60 points get you into the playoffs? No, it doesn't. So those guys just decided it wasn't worth the risk. And as fans, we're disappointed, but we understand the
Right.
decision that they made, because a lot of times for college football players, especially pre-NIL era, this is your one chance to make money. This is it.
Correct.
And so you have to, that's why they call it your money year. So you
Right.
have to do what's in your best interest, because they might not ever have a chance to make that much money again. And again, like, Georgia was mad, but they lost their conference championship, so they knew why they were left out. Florida
That's the
State had
difference.
Florida
That's
State
the
did not
difference,
have
Jesse.
that main bit, and everybody comes in saying, well, they could have went and proved this like Georgia did. Them
Prove
boys,
nothing.
they strapped up and won a bowl of fruit,
Yep.
because you didn't get anything for winning the Orange Bowl. Like, you got to eat some
Nothing.
oranges on a stage under some confetti. You don't get into the playoffs for that. And
Nope.
so, but the reason I say that, again, that's not an indictment on the culture, is
No.
people are so focused on the here and now that they forget Florida State didn't
Right.
have any opt-outs for last year's bowl.
That's
In
right.
2020, Georgia's, and people were trying to say like, oh, well, they didn't have any opt-outs in the last 2 years or whatever. No, they're in the playoffs. Duh. We
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
No one's opting out of the playoffs. Florida State would have had 0 opt-outs if they were
That's
in the
right.
playoffs.
That's right. That's
But in
right. Well, and
2020,
then
I would say their last non-playoff bowl game prior to this one, they had 9 opt-outs, and the year before
Yep.
they had a lot too. So this is not the normal for both teams. You
That's
can't
right.
come into a one-year picture and say their culture is so much better than your culture because you had more opt-outs than them. They have more players in the transfer portal than you. So, like, you
Right.
can go both ways with this. I don't think it is an indictment on the culture. But I do think that you see the difference between a lot of
That's
program
right.
guys and
That's right.
a program that's been built a lot off the backs of transfers.
Yep.
Again, you had to have those guys to
But
transfer.
that's my whole point. It's like, but let's be real. Like, like Florida State fans watching this right now, let's be real. Would you have accepted if Mike Norvell came into 2022 last year, right, with the same team, about the same team, with some brand new freshmen coming in, knowing that it was probably going to be maybe at best a 6 to 7, win team? No. He was on the hot seat after 0-4. And basically everyone, including myself, said on social media, he's got to win next year. And what did he do?
Yeah.
He said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go get some immediate impact players right now and win. And he won 10 games, and we celebrated like it was 1999.
Right. And I mean, you can look at it like this. You can either be Florida State and you can take the transfers, get yourself from 5-7 to 13-0, at which case you land a top 10 class. Now, your recruiting
Correct.
starts to get better in certain areas. That's a topic for another day. But the wins on the field with the transfers are what bridges the gap to where
Yes.
that gets you to be a Georgia, where you start building the success out of the high school ranks.
Yes.
Or you can take the Miami approach, where you post on social media that you're expecting them to give you a trophy for playing the most freshmen, but you're also 7-6 and lost to Rutgers.
That's right.
Again, like,
and all these QBs that you've been after have been shunning you left and right.
Right. So, like, you can't have it both ways. You can't do a youth movement and continue not to have the results.
Right.
You got to do one or the other. And I fully support taking the transfers, even if it means you have to you're going to have these situations at the end. But again, guys, we know, like we already talked about, the situation would not have been the same.
No.
And it had it been a playoff game. And everybody knows that. Again, people are going to fire off their terrible takes that they've been sitting on for a month because, we talked about it. Like after Florida State got left out and we defended the fact that we thought Florida State could have won because, hey, imagine that.
Imagine.
The two teams that showed you they could lose in the regular season lost in the
They
playoffs.
lost.
And
You
the
know what?
teams that showed you they didn't lose in the regular season
Won.
didn't lose in the playoffs. So I think once you made the case that you could have won, everybody said, no, you couldn't have won without Jordan. And then you had the ACC lawsuit come out in public. So people were waiting for this. This is like Roman times. Like you were the blood in the arena that the angry mob wanted to see. So they're going to jump on you. But they don't understand that. And this is one of the, man, I'll tell you, and I will say two things. I'll kick it back to you. First off, if you want to know just where you're trying to get, and this is why you have to take transfers in this game, Florida State. Now, of course, this number would look different if you'd had all your starters in this game. Florida State had a 29.8 blue chip ratio. 29.8%. Georgia had 87.1, almost 60% higher. So, you're trying to get there. But what I will say, man, and there's a couple other points I want to make on the game before we talk about 24 and stuff. But I think the one thing that I'm going to be the saddest about leaving the ACC when we do is losing the ACC huddle crew because I just love those guys. EJ and Eric McLean, man, they're so good. But one thing that Eric McLean told a story about was when he started out at Clemson, I think it was in the Orange Bowl too. They got beat 70-33 by West Virginia.
West Virginia. Yeah,
way back in the day. Everyone makes a joke. West Virginia just scored again. Everyone makes that joke. But instead of folding tent and going away, Clemson went on to have one of the most dominant decades that they've had in program history. So,
two national titles.
Right. People act like this is going to crash the program, and I don't think that's the case. Now, I will say this, this could be a rallying cry for the team. This could bring everybody in and make everybody, whatever want to go out. You saw them lock up a lot of guys. We'll talk about that too. Coming back for 2024, and you've got your quarterback now. That's another big thing there. Thank God we had some positive news for once in our life.
Man, finally.
Right. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. You know what I'm saying? I do think that a lot of that will depend on what you do next year. If you go out and you have a bad season, and I mean like bad season next year, 6 wins or something like that, you could say this probably led to that probably led to that. But if Florida State comes out next year, you got DJ at quarterback now, you got some other pieces you're hunting in the portal. If you can get back to a 10 wins, possibly an ACC championship, and back in the playoffs, nobody's going to worry about what happened in this bowl game 12 months ago. Nobody's going to care about that. So
that's right.
It remains to be seen how much it will affect the program going forward, but I highly, highly doubt this tanks it because 13-0 in an ACC championship with your starters was still proof of concept for Mike Norvell that the system that he follows works. And he took a team from 3-9 or whatever to 13-1, 13-0 with all their starters. So the proof of concept works. And a lot of players, not Twitter players, not Twitter coaches,
that's
not
right.
The people who know the game understand that. Kirby understands that. That's what he talked about in his post game. This is a product of what college football has created.
That's right.
And you're not going to see coaches come out and bash Mike Norvell. Why?
Right.
Because they know they could end up in the same situation if their players were to hit the portal too. They know they could wear a whipping like that. So
that's right.
No, man, this is not a damning on the future of the program, but it spoils the end of your 13-0 season in a way that you didn't want to happen.
Correct.
But I don't think this is a damnation on the Florida State.
I think you're so right. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think this is another pivotal moment of the program. It's not damning, right? But it's also not like a blessing. It's that weird in between of it could swing one or the other way. And the reason why I have the utmost confidence that it's going to swing positive for Florida State is because look at the last pivotal moment for Florida State. 2 years ago, Florida State, I flew across the country from California to Tallahassee, excited to see my Noles play Notre Dame. And they had a chance to win that game, and they didn't. Then the next week, I watched on the couch as we lost in a just bizarre fashion on a Hail Mary pass to Jacksonville State. We would go on to go 0-4. And at that moment, that was a very pivotal moment of the program because it was either Mike was about to lose this team, then obviously lose the fan base, which probably, I don't know if they would have fired him because they just fired Willie Taggart, 2 years ago, but it would have been dark times for Florida State. And instead of folding, instead of quitting, Mike stood up on a press conference. I'll never forget. I watched it live. And he said he knows those players know who they got in the trenches with him. And he's going to fight. And all he can do is show up and fight, fight, fight. And what did they end up doing? They ended up finishing that season 5-3, right? They didn't make it to a bowl game. They should have won that Florida game, but they let their emotions get the best of them. But they finished that season 5-3. And then they went into the offseason and they attacked that thing like it was their last day on earth. Then they come out and they go 10-3. And then they attack the next offseason like it was their last day on earth. And what did they do? They went 13-0, won the ACC championship. And then they had this happen, right? This pivotal moment. And if you saw that post-game speech, not the press conference, the speech inside that locker room, man, I was tearing up watching that video because I would run through a wall right now for Mike Norvell after that speech. Holy goodness. And you don't think Florida State put that thing out there on purpose?
Right.
Because there are tons, regardless of who comes from the transfer portal or not, I guarantee you that those players who get into this program next season, we're not taking a step back. I'm not saying we're going to go undefeated again. I'm not even saying we may or may not make the playoffs. I don't know. But we're definitely not taking a step back because you saw it in that video. That man is determined for this program to get back to the top of college football. And he has proven over and over again that when all the chips are against him, when his back is to the wall, when the world is ganged up, that man comes out swinging and he wins. He wins. He wins. And I believe everything in me believes that Florida State is still on the climb up.
And that happens a lot. Poor Mike Norvell. I know, man, but this is the truth. Like, if this program survived Willie Taggart, who, by the way,
That's right,
had Penix on campus, and
that's right, and
he
lost him.
It wasn't a take. So there's that. And then you survived 0-4. Like, this program will survive. They're going to go work the same offseason, that they always did to put themselves in the best position to win. And man, it's funny because, it's not funny. It's actually kind of, I feel so bad for Mike Norvell, but it's funny in a sarcastic sense where it's like, this man, if karma is true and it's just waiting to swing back around, they say that God will never put more on you than you can handle. He's testing Mike Norvell right now because just what he has been through, the COVID year, the Jordan getting injured, the little bit of culture issues they had early on with some things. If you guys remember back to when he first got here, then you get snubbed out of the playoffs. Then you take this type of beating in the Orange Bowl. Like, man, when the karma finally swings back around, Mike Norvell's about to win 6 national championships. I feel it because, but you got, I mean, and you have to admire the way he goes about it. He never breaks Mike. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
He's always true to himself. He always is consistent in his message. And there's never there's never a, oh, woe is me.
Yeah.
It's let's get back to work. And so I think that's why you're going to be fine going into next year. And, to be honest, when you look at this game, as unfortunate as it was, there are some things, like, I feel like Brock Glenn made a better impression. Now, he still looks like a true freshman. It still wasn't great. Yeah. But he made a better impression in this game. I think you feel good about him being your backup in 2024. I mean, he took less sacks.
Yeah.
His QBR was almost double what it was against Louisville.
Yeah.
His yards were almost double what it was against Louisville. His big time throw rate was 11.5%, which is great. So, you saw that stuff that was positive. And, and here's the thing too. If you don't think the starters mattered that much, look at the offensive line. That was really only place that was really an intact group. Yeah. They only gave up 4 sacks. 2 sacks. They only gave up 2 sacks. Yep. They gave up almost similar pressure numbers they actually gave up 3 less pressures against Georgia than they did Louisville. So tell me that, hey, guess what? Starters actually make a difference.
Yeah. Now listen, starters matter. For people out there saying, "Oh, the Florida State should have, they should have still, tried to play a game." Man, come on. You're talking about, 4-star plus and 5-star plus players versus probably a lot of your, 3-star, 2-star players, your walk-ons. I mean, that's what Florida State had. And listen, I don't believe in karma, and I do think God can give you more than you can handle. But what I would say, though, is that if you show up and you do what you're supposed to do, right, which is what Mike Norvell and that coaching staff does, that those players are going to get better. You've seen the development.
Right.
You've seen what they've done. You've seen they've proven over and over again that if you get into this program, they will develop you to the best of your capabilities. Now, you look at somebody like Gilbert Elman, he came in and you're like, well, he just transferred out. Well, like, because he had reached his potential. They got him to as much as he could. Sometimes you can only squeeze the orange, and you're only going to get as much juice as in that orange. And so in the same way, man, I trust that whatever is coming, it's going to come, and it's going to be good for Florida State.
Right. And I think you also have to look at too in this game, you got a lot of guys who got experience that they hadn't had before against the upper echelon of college football. I mean, it is what it is. Like you got baptism by fire. Like you learned real quick how good you got to be to play at that type of level, the championship level that you want to be at. And so I think it's good for those guys to get exposed to that type of environment, going forward, because there were so many young guys. I mean, again, I think this is the good that you take out of this. You had 8 first-time starters. That's bad on the scoreboard.
That's right.
That's good for next year.
That's right.
35 guys played 20-plus snaps in this game for Florida State. 29 of those should be here in 2024. That's some that we assume would be back. Probably 28, because I think I included Edmond in that. So, again, you got 25-plus guys, depending on a few more washouts or whatnot, that will be back next year that got to play in this game. That's significant experience for these guys that are coming back. You also had the incoming freshmen, Cromenhawk and, Lester and all these guys that were there throughout the process. They got to get up to speed already. So, again, these are the positives that you can take out of that. There's not a lot of positives that you can take out of a game like that, but you did get really good experience. You got 2 extra weeks of practice for bowl prep for a lot of the young guys that you can build off of going into 2024. Because I mean, let's be honest, man. You lose 63-3, that's absolutely embarrassing and it sucks. If you lose 4-3, guess what? You still lost. It doesn't matter. Right. So it is what it is.
This ain't Moral Gables. We don't take moral victories here.
Exactly. It didn't matter if it was close or not. You still lost. So at least you got that experience, and that's going to build going forward. So there are some good things that you can take from that experience, even if as painful as it was. But I do wholeheartedly believe, that they are just going to keep hitting the ground running. They're going to come back and turn their focus to next year. Again, you already got some good news the day after the game. And so, another thing, Michael, that even throughout a game like this, another thing that you can feel positive about is the gear you can get at Alumni Hall, our title sponsor for this episode.
Let's go.
And, they have a great selection of everything you need, from clothing to merchandise to gifts to all kinds of fun things that they have. And you guys can get it at a great price using code SPEAR. That gets you 10% off your entire purchase. 1817 Thomasville Road. Currently, they are moving in February. We will update you guys with their new location when that happens. Or just take it the easy way. Go online, shop alumnihall.com, navigate over to the Florida State page, get your 10% off with code SPEAR. Thank you so much for supporting those that support us. Now, with that being said, Michael, look, man, there was a lot of good out of 2023. We'll go back and recap that in another episode. You won the conference. You knocked off Clemson in Death Valley for the first time in a long time. That was really your early season goals. You still accomplished a lot of those things. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It sucked the way that it ended.
Yes, it did.
It really kind of it crapped on the fact that you won the conference and you were disappointed within like 8 hours of winning the conference championship. The way this expedited playoff thing goes, all that stinks. But again, this is the title of the episode, Turning the Page. So now, while we'll go back and celebrate those guys, because there's moments I want to take the time to appreciate for the 2023 season. I want to spend 10 minutes talking about Jordan Travis, because he's been one of my favorite players to come through Florida State. Just the way he loves this program, man. I feel my heart goes out to Jordan, because, imagine him having to watch that on Saturday, knowing that if he hadn't have got hurt, probably still would have got left out of the playoffs. But, regardless. And again, for what it's worth, guys, I don't know how many of you guys boycotted the Orange Bowl or the other playoff games or not. Yeah, man, with Jordan Travis, I think they're putting it on. They're putting it on Alabama, who couldn't even snap the ball. And everybody wanted good quarterback play in the playoffs, and Milroe throws for 116 yards. I mean, I'm pretty sure we could have figured that out. Pretty sure we could have thrown for 116 yards and got sacked 5 times. That makes it even more frustrating, as poetic justice as it was to watch both of the one-loss teams fall out. You feel like you could have beat them, and that's what
Yes.
pisses you off even more.
I
But
I love that. Sorry to interrupt you. I love that. I just it makes me think of that comment that Mike Norvell made on the ACC huddle after the
oh
ACC
yeah,
title
yeah,
game, where he said, yeah, they've done some great things, but in their doing the great things, they proved that they could lose. We proved that we couldn't. And the teams that won in those playoff games were the teams that proved that they could win every single game. And the teams that lost were the teams that proved that they could lose. Again, Florida State should have been in. Now I'm done.
exactly, and that is the case, man. Because Washington had close games. Michigan had, I mean, not a lot, but they had a couple of close games against some good teams.
Right.
But then Washington, like we said, they had warts on their schedule. So
Yep.
did Alabama. So did Texas. They all had those close games. So did Florida State. So did Georgia.
Yep.
That's fine. They all had those warts. But again, it's the teams that found a way to win, even
Yep.
in those bad games, that
Yep.
deserved that got the win at the end of the day. And that's why Florida State should have been in. But
Yep.
that's neither here nor there. We'll never find out. You will never convince me. My last dying breath, besides saying some dirty words to Boo Corrigan that that start with an F and a Y. Besides dropping an F bomb at Boo Corrigan, my last words are going to be Jordan Travis and the 2023 Florida State Seminoles would have won the national championship, and you can never
Bam.
convince me otherwise. So
Same.
but right, but that's neither here nor there. So with that being said, now you turn your focus to 2024 because there's nothing you can do about whatever happens. There's nothing you can do about that. So now you look at 2024 and you got to pick up the pieces and carry on at some point. So I think Florida State, obviously looking at 2024, you get finally some good news. Feels like the first good news we've had in a long time.
Right.
You get a commitment from DJ Uyunglele at quarterback. Comes in
Oh,
from
look at
Oregon State. Man,
you.
I've been practicing. I'm still going to
Proud
use
of you.
I'm still going to use DJU, but the official commitment deserved the full name.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it's good news, man, because I feel like when you look at DJU, first and foremost, he ups your win floor for 2024. Point
Yep.
blank. I mean, you love what Brock Glenn, he stood in the paint and he slung it when he had to against Georgia.
Yep.
I don't really want to pile on the Orange Bowl. We just buried that, but you still had 4 drops in this game. You were 1 of 5
Right.
uncontested catches, and he was pressured 40% of the time. He's still never really been in a great situation.
Right. Right.
But you feel good about him being the backup. But you obviously see now that he needs another year. It
That's
is
right.
what it is,
Yep.
especially when you're
Needs a full year.
right, and especially when you're in a realm of college football now where everybody's like attention span and mindset is so short now
That's right.
that you have to win right now or everybody's mad at you. And so I think that you have to do what you have to do to win in a 1-year segment. Like you don't just want to roll with Brock Glenn because you're scared to recruit over him like he might transfer and win 7 games when you can go get a guy that can win you 10 games. That's not saying either that would be the case either way because we don't know. But if you can get a guy who ups your win floor immediately and is walking in, competing for the starting job, most likely going to win it, you got to take it. And
Right.
I
Absolutely.
think what people have to remember too is regardless of whether you think DJ's the guy or not, when Tate hit the portal, Duffy was already in the portal. At that point, you had to take a quarterback anyway. You can't roll
That's
into
right.
the season with 2 guys, one
No.
being a true freshman, one being a true sophomore. You had to take somebody. So you get the best guy available. And I think when you look at DJU, it's got to make you excited about 24, man, because I think this immediately now, of course, they got to surround him with talent. They got to get some pieces to go
Right.
with him, but this immediately puts you back in the conversation for winning the ACC and hopefully making that 12-team playoff next year because the clay that you have to work with is excellent clay. Now, we're going to say a little bit of kind of 2 things here. Coming out of high school, he was a former 5-star recruit. He had a point per the 247 composite. He had a .9949 rating. Jameis Winston was .9915. So this guy was even higher rated than Jameis.
Right.
In the same class, he was ranked higher than C.J. Stroud, Carson Beck, Will Howard, Tate Rodemaker, and Tyler Van Dyke, all from that 2020 class. So he was the number 2 nationally and number 1 pro-style quarterback. So this is a guy that it's there. Like all the tools are there. 6'4", 250 plus pounds, a rocket of arm, can throw the ball probably 80 yards. But a lot of people are going to go, the hype has never really matched what
The
you would
production. Yeah.
like look at what CJ Stroud did. Look at what Carson Beck has done. You know what I mean? Things like that. People are going to point to that. But a couple of things I will say when you look at DJU as your quarterback, and if you want a full on breakdown, I recorded a video about this, why DJU could be the answer for FSU. I suggest you go check that out. But the thing you have to think about at Clemson was, first off, he criticized that offense on the way out the door. They didn't use this. They didn't use him in the system. They didn't adapt the system to him. They
Right.
tried to make him adapt to the system. Well, they fired their offensive coordinator.
Yes, they did.
And they threw for less yards a game and less touchdowns this year than they did last year. DJ was not really the problem there.
No.
Clemson's also biggest knock the last 2-3 years. They don't really have a lot of dynamic receivers.
Nope.
And so, thank goodness Will Shipley. Best of luck in the NFL,
I'm
bro.
so glad that boy gone.
Get out of here, man. I don't know what it is with y'all having these little white dudes that play for like 35 years. Hunter Renfro, all
Hunter
these guys.
Renfro.
Like, man, I don't know what it is, but he's out of here, thank goodness. But again, it doesn't look like DJ was the problem there. And then you look at what he did at Oregon State. Had a good year, but you could say, okay, they went, I think, like 9-4, something like that. But that was a little bit more of a talent issue. So when you look at 2023 Oregon State, per the 247 team talent composite ratings, they're 56th most talented roster. 56. So you don't have a lot of surrounding talent, and they still had a relatively good season. For reference, in 2023, Florida State is the 20th ranked talent. So again, you give him that talent. And Clemson, his last year there was 5th. Now the receivers were kind of the weak point there. But again, you put him in a system that can succeed. For DJ, they use him how they're supposed to, or how he best benefits in that offense. You give him some talent around him, which Florida State's going to have to go get some dudes.
Right.
By the way, his number one receiver is in the portal. Let's see if we can make that happen.
Yeah.
I know he might be a little guy, but hey, we just talked about Renfro and and Shipley. So but this is a guy that you bring in, and I'll kick it to you and let you give some thoughts on DJ here. This is a guy that comes in with 40 Power 5 starts. 40. I don't think your two quarterbacks have been through 40 practices yet.
Yeah.
So this is huge, man. Brock Glenn has 2 starts, and in those 40 starts, he's 30-10.
Yeah.
So again, you got a guy with proven experience, a guy who can win you games. Am I saying he's going to come in and be the Heisman, a Heisman hopeful, like maybe you would have thought with Cam Ward? No, I'm not saying that. You're going to need probably some better dudes on the, you've already locked up a bunch of guys, but maybe if you get some better offensive linemen, some better receivers, maybe we have a legit conversation then.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking for a guy who can replace the production that Jordan Travis had in 2023 and can win you those games, that can get you, because keep in mind, as disjointed as we thought Clemson was falling off in 2022, we said, are the cracks in the foundation there?
Right.
We all think that. They still went undefeated in the ACC and won the ACC championship and went to the Orange Bowl. So you have a guy that even in a down year led Clemson to that. And so I think this is a guy that at the end of the day can come in and win you games and let those young guys mature another year to not only when they're ready, but now they'll also be learning under the wing of a guy who has 40 Power 5 starts.
That's right. Yeah, and the thing about DJU that I like a lot is, like you said, he's 31-10. He's a proven winner. He's proven that he can win at the highest of levels. He, is at Clemson. They I can't remember exactly what their record was last year.
I think it was 11-2. I think
11-2 or 10-3, something like that. Yeah. And so, I mean, the thing is, though, he won multiple games. He won 10 games. He came in and Clemson used him wrong. Like you said, they used him wrong. They tried to mold him to their offensive system instead of molding their offenses around him. Well, we know that if you look at Mike Norvell pre-Florida State, DJU is the type of quarterback he constantly went after and wanted. Right? That big, stocky, with a good arm, can run, can be mobile, and all those things. And so he's now got that quarterback. So I highly, highly believe that you're going to see a lot of that Memphis style of play come back to Florida State. What we saw earlier, which is running counter, getting that running game going. This year, we just did not have the ability to really do a lot of what we did the last year because we didn't have the offensive linemen. They couldn't stay healthy, one. And two, and this might just be my opinion, but I really believe that Mike Norvell understood what type of team he had this year. And he looked at that team and said, Jordan is the key. If Jordan gets hurt, this thing could fall apart. And what happened? The
He was
second
right.
to last game, right? Jordan. Now the team didn't fall apart, but that
Right.
offense wasn't the same.
Right.
That's the one argument I agree with to the college football pundits out there. This offense wasn't the same. They still could have won a national championship, but
Right. With
whatever.
defense. Yep.
Yeah. So getting DJU in, who is a durable guy, who's not, I don't think he's missed any game for injury. He's a great passer. He has great skill set. He reads well. I think you get him in, you get some players around him, and I think he's going to be good. The one thing that I do think is a issue is really his accuracy.
Yep.
I think that's been the thing that has kind of been harped on him. If you watch him, if you go and watch any of the film on him, he has a long windup. A lot of quarterbacks will have the ball here and they just go and go. His ball comes all the way down and then through, right? And so what ends up happening is he ends up throwing sometimes behind the players, so they have to adjust, or he doesn't get it right into that pocket. And I think Coach Tokras and Mike Norvell, I think they'll work. They're not going to completely adjust his throwing motion because look, he's got 1 year. You're not going to change it in 1 year. But I think they're going to try to make sure they create an offense that accounts for his throwing motion. Right. Changing some of the timing of when to throw, when to step back, all those different things to help account for that. But man, I'm actually really excited. I know Florida State was pursuing both Cam Ward and DJU, and whatever you believe about who was second and whatever, I don't know. What I do know is that the whole time I kept thinking, yes, Cam Ward seems more explosive, but man, DJU not safe. I don't want to use the word safe, but he feels the most surefire thing that can help us get to 10 wins. My goal next year is for us to get to 10 wins. If we get to 10 wins, then everything's on the table as far as the ACC championship, as far as the playoffs, all those things. And I felt like DJU it feels for me more of a 10-win quarterback than Cam Ward was.
Right. I agree. I think when you looked at both of them, I thought with Cam Ward, you had that wild card. You know what I mean? You could have a Heisman winner. You could have a Jaden Daniels in your pocket.
Right.
But I also think with DJU, I was excited about him from the beginning because you had a guy that you felt like could come in and still play at a really high level and do the things that you need him to do to be successful. And it's funny because you mentioned the durability. That's what you get out of the size. I actually was kind of writing an article up on DJU, and I noticed that, and I didn't put it in the article because our luck at Florida State, and I didn't want to jinx anything.
We didn't want to jinx it.
Right, but he's been present for pretty much every game that he didn't get. I know he got benched in a few at Clemson, but that's the thing, man. Is again, you bring in a guy who can immediately up your win floor, that can put you in that conversation. Again, is he going to be the best quarterback in the ACC? No, I'm not saying that. But like you mentioned, you also give him time to come in and work with Tokars and Mike Norvell. Look what they did with Jordan Travis. They could just make some minor tweaks that could put him over the top. If you give him some good receivers, if they go out and land some guys in the portal, they're still in it with the Evan Stewart kid from A&M. They could certainly pursue the kid from Oklahoma or Oregon State, his top receiver.
I mean, they got Jalen Brown from LSU, who's in the portal, and FSU finished second to LSU.
Right. So, you get a couple guys around him, and you could see the potential there. So, I think DJU is good. I mean, even in 2022, the conference he's going to be returning to, he was 5th in touchdowns responsible for, 4th in passing touchdowns. And you're also talking about a conference that had Drake May, Sam Hartman, Jordan Travis, Garrett Schrader even. You had a lot of these guys who were talented quarterbacks, and you were top 5. So, if you can get a top 5 quarterback and you can reload some pieces on the defense, you feel good about it. And then, again, you talk about what the run game did for this offense this year. At Clemson, he ran the ball 111 times. Man. So, this is a guy, 664 yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground. So, this gives you that whole aspect. This also helps you, his pressure to sack ratio at Clemson was low, 18.9%. And last year at Oregon State, it was only 8.8%. So, if you got an offensive line that's not necessarily dominant, this is a guy that's going to help that too. So, I think you get a lot of good out of DJU. Again, I think he can be what you need, and with a little polishing, this can be a really good fit for this offense. He's got a strong arm. He can stretch the field. He does have some accuracy and a little bit of turnover issues, but I will say when you throw the ball deep a lot like he does, It's not going to be like people talk
Correct.
about Cam Ward had like a 20% higher completion percentage or something like that.
He
It
didn't
was a
throw
lot
that
higher
far.
number, but 61% of his passes were 10 yards or less or something crazy
Right.
like that, where DJU stretches the field. So it's a different ask. But at the very end of the day, man, the one thing that excites me the most about DJ, he wants to be here. He said, this was
That's
my
right.
only visit. I wanted to be a Seminole. They were, we know they kind of slow played him a little bit to see how Cam played out
Right.
and things like that, but he wants to be here. And so
That's
to
right.
me, that is more than anything. When you talk about the situation we just talked about, that means more than anything, the fact that he wants to be here. So big addition. Again, you got to wait to see the pieces that are going to be added around him. But I definitely feel like this is a guy that ups your win floor and is good for the young guys to kind of go under his wing, have some time to develop and all that stuff. And speaking of 2024 and surrounding him with some of the guys, the Battle's End has been going to work the past few days.
That's right.
They have locked up so far for 2024 that we know of Shaheem Brown, Lawrence Toafili, Patrick Payton is back,
Yep.
Byron Turner's back, Darius
Yep.
Washington is back,
Yep.
Robert Scott, Keandre Jones, and
Yep.
Maurice Smith.
That's
So
right.
you've locked up a good bit of your offensive linemen here. That is important. You've got some important pieces on the defense as well. That is good to see. Now, when you look at some of the other notes that we'll get to on 2024 as we get ready to wrap things up here, Gilbert Edmond, as we mentioned before, did jump in the portal. I mean, it stinks to lose a depth guy with some
Right.
experience, but at the same time, he wasn't necessarily a big impact player for you.
Right.
So you're going to have to replace the production.
Yes.
But, if you look at if you get a guy or two, bless you, then you
Thank
feel
you.
perfectly fine with that. Now, there are going to be a lot of visits happening this weekend through the 7th. I believe it's open because
That's
you
right.
got an extension window for some of the teams that played in the playoffs. No one's talking about the 9 players, I think, that hit the portal the day after Alabama
That's right.
lost.
That's right.
Where's their culture issues? There was one
Oh,
guy, I forget who it was, one of their best defensive
he
ends.
said, "I'm gone for
He's like,
show."
I'm friggin' out of here. Like the dude was still wearing Alabama pads. The bus ain't even warmed up yet. And he's like, I'm out of here. So like you want to talk about culture? Well, there you go. So Edmond out. Now, some names to watch in the portal that are going to be coming up. Speaking of Alabama, Earl Little Jr. from Alabama,
Yes.
DB is in the portal. This is a former 4-star class of 2022. Now, Bama is actively trying to get him to stay because they know
Yes.
the upside
They
potential
are.
they have. But keep in mind, Patrick Surtain was his high school coach.
Boom.
So you have an in there. He is supposed to visit Florida State this weekend, so that
Yes.
could be an addition. Now, you like a lot of the DBs that you have, but you can never have enough talent. I mean, you always want to recruit over everybody with the most talented guys because that's how you get to be like a Georgia. You think Kirby cares if a 4-star is like, oh, no, you recruited over me?
Right.
Bye, have fun in the
Bye.
portal. Like that's how you build that depth. So, like we mentioned, they're still in it for 5-star Evan Stewart out of Texas A&M. Currently visiting right now, you have a Furman offensive lineman, Pearson Toomey,
Yep.
on campus right now, 6'3", 295. 33 starts at Furman. He is originally from Jacksonville, Florida, so that's probably a good reason why you got him on campus. This is a guy, he's got some size. He's got a lot of experience even at that level. He did play against, I will say this, I went and looked him up. He did play against South Carolina this year and had some pretty good PFF grades. Now, PFF grades aren't
Right.
they're not the end all be all. But I mean, his PFF grade in that game was 75.8. That's really good. Pass blocking was 83.6. So this is a guy, I think he only give up like 1 sack the last 2 years. And he's got a neck beard.
Right.
So like
I
anytime
love a
you
neck
get
beard.
right, anytime you get a big burly lineman with a neck beard, I mean that's Dylan Gibbons. You know what I mean?
Dylan Gibbons. That's what I was gonna say.
That's the type of guy that moves dudes. So that's someone that you feel good about there as well. Some of his run blocking grades are hit or miss, but he's a good pass blocker. So that could be someone. Look, guys, it's probably going to be a depth piece, but if he manages to be a starter, Bless Harris come from Lamar, so
That's right.
Don't ever count that out. Another name that's supposed to be on campus this weekend, I don't know if he's arrived yet or not, was UNC Charlotte linebacker Nakai. I guess I'm saying that right. Nakia Hill Green.
Yep.
Expected to
He's
visit this
here.
weekend.
He's
He
there.
is here. Okay,
Yep.
I like
there.
this guy. I think this could be someone you could really look at here. The size, he has all the size you want, 6'3", 232. He was originally committed to Michigan. He is a 3-star in the composite, 4-star as of 247, class of 2020. He actually started 6 games at Michigan in 2021, including playing 28 snaps in the Big Ten title game and another 28 snaps in the playoffs against, I believe it was Georgia that year that they played them. He did not play in 2022, but then he started 7 games for UNC Charlotte this past year. Remember, Atkins came from UNC Charlotte. That could be a little tie in there. But again, this is a guy that, as a sophomore, came in and played in a playoff game for Michigan. So I think if you can get him, if the Orange Bowl, I know they were young, I know they're inexperienced. If the Orange Bowl exposed you in one area, it's going to be linebacker. So you have got to get some help in here at linebacker. You have to, because Kalen DeLoach is gone, Bethune is gone, Lundy's gone. You got to get some linebackers in here. So that's a good one there. There's also some interest between UF linebacker Scooby Williams. There is mutual interest there. That could be a target to develop as well. And the last 2 names I got for you here, the Indiana running back Jalen Lucas is supposed to be visiting starting on the 5th, starting tomorrow. Running back from Indiana, not necessarily who you're going for as a running back.
No.
But he is a excellent first-team All-American, I believe, returner.
Not just excellent, like the best.
He is a great returner. So this could be a special teams weapon. This could be like getting a new version, an updated version of Greg Reed back there.
That's right.
And he's also half brothers with Ja'Kai Douglas.
I was just going to say,
so
that's right.
You have an in there as well. And the last guy to talk about here, I saved the last because it's probably not going to go your way like you wanted to, and that's the Purdue defensive end. He has got a crystal ball to go to Texas A&M. He's supposed to be on campus this weekend. We'll see if he makes it. If he makes it,
breaking news, he committed to Texas A&M.
And we'll stop talking about him there. But I will say this. A lot of people are going to be disappointed in this, and I totally understand that. Look, it is what it is, man. When you want to have this conversation, you got to get better at recruiting in the trenches on defense. It is what it is. You can develop guys better than probably any team in the country. They've shown that ability.
Right.
You got to get clay to mold. You can't sit there and make pots with no clay.
Right.
But this is a guy that was like 30 minutes from campus, his hometown at Texas A&M. Elko is one heck of a defensive coach, and you got a Texas A&M who can throw a bigger bag than anybody at anybody.
That's right.
So that is not one to be. It's disappointing, but don't trash the staff for losing one.
Right.
Texas A&M had home field advantage, money advantage. They had all
coaching,
that
all like that. It's disappointing, but it's not the end of the world for that one. I will say, and I know we're going to do a show, later on here in the off season where we talk about more really the state of the program and coaching. So I won't get too much in it, but we're going to talk about, that the trenches. There's some issues there as far as at least on the defensive side of the ball, in the recruiting part. And so we need to address that so that we can be fair and unbiased.
Right.
But that area of recruiting, the development's there. Like, don't get us wrong, the development's there, but that recruiting, there's some things that we need to talk about there.
Right. You got to get some guys in the fold. I mean, really, when you look at, to me, when I'm looking at 2024, and again, we're going to do an episode hopefully next week on a way too early look for 2024. Those are just some of the names that you're watching for this weekend. So of course they could still get a lot of guys on campus. There's still the spring session as well. You only had to have your name in the portal. Didn't mean you had to be committed somewhere by this time. So they can still get some names in. It's just, you found one that you really liked and you missed out on. So that's unfortunate. I still think going into 2024, without going too far into this, if you want to compete for like an ACC title and push into the playoffs and all that, you're going to need a lot of pieces. And I think you need at least 2 or 3 guys on the defensive line. That's going to be the one place where you see what happens when you don't match up against a team like Georgia.
That's right.
They run for 10 yards a carry. You see what happens. You saw what happened in the 10-3 year. You couldn't stop the run up the middle because you didn't have that depth at defensive tackle. So it has to get better.
Right.
Hopefully there's some guys that can get out of the portal. Hopefully they can develop some of the guys that they have on the roster, but it's just got to get better if you're going to compete at that championship level. Now, I think there's a lot of positions where Florida State can just kind of agree to go young next year, give themselves the best shot to get into the playoffs and win the ACC. Maybe you don't need some guys, but if you're really trying to compete on that high level, I mean, let's be honest, Michael, you need probably another 10 to 15 pieces out of the portal. I know it sounds like a lot. It sounds drastic, but again, if you're trying to replace these pieces and you're trying to do that roster churn to get to that talent floor level where you can win the ACC and you can put yourself in that playoff conversation and then compete, you still got a long way to go in the portal. So they've got 2 really good pieces so far.
Right.
But that's it.
Well, because when you look at the high school class coming in, it's the best class Florida State has had, in a long time, since what, 2014, I think, 2015.
2016, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, 2016. So it's the best class. There's about maybe 1 to 3, I'm gonna put it in that range, that could legit be, top 2 depth chart pieces. The
Right.
rest of them are development. They're good. Trust me, they're good, but they're
Right.
still development. And so you're gonna have to go get, if you want to stay in that upper echelon of the conversation, let's say the top 12. You want to stay in that top 12 of the conversation for the college football invitational. You're gonna have to go get some more players to continue to help you bridge the gap. Because again, like we said earlier, you're going to need at least 3, maybe 4 more of top 10 recruiting classes before the portal now just becomes you get 2 or 3 pieces. But right now, the portal is still a big part of how you continue to climb. And that's okay. We understand that. Go get
Right.
them.
Yep. You still got to bring in those 2, 3, 4 more classes to where those young guys are ready and waiting in the wings, and those are as
Right.
talented as everybody else has. And I think too, you look at Georgia's lost 16 players in the portal.
That's right.
Clemson's lost a bunch of pieces. Dabo's probably going to take some players this year. Alabama's lost a
Maybe.
lot. I think you have a lot of the bigger fish that are also swimming in the pond now. So people
Right.
have to understand that, like before, where
That's right.
Clemson and Georgia and Alabama really didn't take a lot of transfer pieces. They kind of just grabbed who they wanted and
Right.
then moved along. Now you have guys that got to replace depth too. So
That's
you're
right.
going to be competing a little bit harder against some of these guys. But yeah, you got a good 10 or 15 left to go, man. If you want to really put yourself in the conversation. But I do think that, again, you're continuously getting better, obviously. Now it's like you don't feel like without those pieces, with the pieces you got, add 2 or 3 more in there, you don't feel like you're going to go 5-7. You feel like
Right.
you could still win 8, 9 games. But if you were to get those 10 or 15 quality transfers, you feel like, okay, we could make a run at a title next year.
Right.
And
That's right.
that's just where it is for right now. But yeah, man, I think overall, like I said, as we just get ready to wind this one down, 2023 was a special and important year that will never be forgotten amongst Florida State fans for both reasons.
That's
For
right.
the 13-0 ACC champions and for the snub and the blowout in the bowl game. You're going to have 2 separate memories of this. You're going to have like happiness and PTSD at the same time. So like there's that. But at the same time, I think there will be positives that will be taken from it. There
Yeah.
will be a shadow that's cast over this season forever because of the way it ended. But at the end of the day, I think the important thing to remember is, as bad as the month of December was for this program, outside of winning
That's
the
right.
ACC championship, you are in a better position right now than you were 12 months ago. You
Yeah.
feel like the program as a whole is not going anywhere. And this is something that, and we'll do some closing thoughts here, but this is something that you mentioned on another episode before, where really, I know with the portal you can win faster than people think, but you are ahead of schedule right now
Yes.
to where
Yes,
you
you are.
probably expected to be at. So knowing that you're ahead of schedule, as bad as the ending was, you know, it's funny, we talked about this before, man. I feel like this season ended in a more painful fashion than
Yeah.
the 10-3 season in 2022. But at the same time, I would rather be mad about finishing 13-1 than I would mad about finishing 7-6 or something like that.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
still in a better position.
That's
You
right.
still expect to win probably 10 games next year with some pieces in the portal. So you're still better off than you were. And as disappointing as the end was, you have to appreciate where the program stands to get you there.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Like when you think about where Mike Norvell has come from, I mean, you're talking about, 3-6, 5-7, 10-3, and then 13-1. I mean, that's incredible. And like I said in that other show, is you're ahead of schedule, because let's think about it. After the 5-7 season, if you don't go get those portal pieces as you did in 2022, and you maybe got 1 or 2 that were pretty good, you're probably looking at a 7 to 8 win team that year. And then this year, let's say you got, maybe additional 1 or 2 and you had some of them come back, you're probably looking at a 8-9 win season. Next year would have been the year you were looking at, like going 10-3 and potentially challenging for the ACC. But you did that last year. You were literally 2 games away from going to the ACC championship game. This year, you go 13-0 and you win the ACC championship game. Now, next year, are you going to take a step back? Maybe a little bit, right?
Right.
But you're also going to take steps forward for long-term viability. That's
Right.
that's where Florida State is ahead of schedule. Is that the long-term viability of the program is much
Yep.
higher than it was 2 years ago. And much further than where you typically would see this if you didn't have the transfer portal. And again, the transfer portal is allowing you to build up those classes while winning so that you don't, because, in this day and age of college football, if you don't win by year 2 or 3, and
You're
if it
out.
doesn't look better, you're gone, you're fired, right?
Yep.
The transfer portal is allowing you to win while also building long-term viability, getting to the places where Georgia and Alabama can sustain losses, can sustain opt-outs, and still go beat a Power 5 football team 63-3. That's what you're trying to get to, and that's what's allowing. And Mike is on the way. The climb is real, people. The climb is real. We're seeing it happen. I believe that this team, this program is still on the up, and I have my full faith and trust in what Norvell and Co will do.
I definitely agree, man. I mean, when you look at Mike Norvell assembled a team that did go 13-0.
That's right.
And here's the wildest thing about all this, man. Like the way this ended was makes you feel so bad about the situation and how it ended. And that was terrible. On the flip side of that, no matter what anyone tells you, hypothetically, like there is a 50-50 chance that had Florida State have got into the playoffs, Mike Norvell would have won a national title
That's right.
in
That's
year
right.
4. So,
That's
like,
right.
Nebraska's been trying to do what Mike Norvell did in 4 years for 40 years. You know what I
Talk
mean? Like,
about Miami. Come on now.
exactly. Like, you have many big name programs, powerhouse programs, blue blood programs. Look at Texas. They made the playoffs one time. They still have not won a playoff game. So,
Yep.
Florida State could have easily been in the national championship.
That's right.
They on Monday night. They could have won a national championship in year 4. So, you still take Florida State, who Mike Norvell, the staff patched together a bunch of transfers on a roster that still has one of the lower blue chip ratios for the top 6 teams, and was able to go compete and put themselves with a possibility. Let's just say it's not a tinfoil hat situation and Jordan doesn't break his leg. There's a good chance Florida State, Mike Norvell put together a program that went from 3-9 to a national champion in 4
That's
years.
right.
That's really impressive. So you give him time to keep recruiting and keep building and you got the best 2 quarterbacks you've had in this entire time. No offense to Jordan on your roster. You have a 4 and a 5 star that are competing. So the pieces are there. The method is there. The path is there. It's just unfortunate that you'll always have in 2023, you'll always have the what if.
Yep, that's right.
That's the hard part, because Mike Norvell very well could have won a national title this year, and we'd be looking at this whole situation completely different. And it's not that he could have, but Jordan Travis got hurt and they lost an ACC championship game. No, he very well could have. They got screwed out of the chance. That's a whole different ending to the story than Jordan got hurt, you lost a game. You did everything you were supposed to do. So you feel good about what they can do going forward. You know that a lot of it was pushing their chips into the table for this year. But, at the end of the day, man, I feel good about the leadership of this program and where they're taking Florida State. And you just got to go out and really do some work in the portal. So, yeah, man, with that being said, we're going to bury 23. And like I said, we'll have another episode where we'll come back and we'll enjoy the moments, because, man, that LSU game was fun. That Clemson game was fun. All that stuff was fun. I want to take time to enjoy that, because with the way the season ended, we didn't have time to do that. And then we'll be back with a way too early look at 2024, kind of projecting how things play out. We'll look at the schedule a little bit, look at some of the pieces on the roster, and evaluate that as well. But yeah, man, all in all, a really fun year came to a disappointing close. But at the end of the day, you feel like you're still in a good position no matter what the outcome of that Orange Bowl was, because it would have been different with all your starters. So, I believe, and man, I'll tell you what, that cinematic recap, I didn't know if I was ready to watch it, and it destroyed my heart watching it, because I loved this team. This was that, and this is my last comment here, but the one thing about this team too, not only did they win on the field, they were easy to root for. They were easy to cheer for. It was a good group of guys, and I think that they were a very lovable team. Kalen DeLoach and Jordan Travis and all these guys were really easy to cheer for. So that was a good thing as well. I think the off the field, the on the field, everything made you feel good about this program, and I'm excited to see where it goes next year. So, with that being said, guys, we'll be back next week with some more shows coming at you. You guys have a great weekend, and just enjoy what it was, man. So, until next time. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for your support throughout the 2023 season. And although the season is over, we'll be ramping up content for you guys all off season. So stay tuned, like and subscribe to Plant the Spear to stay connected, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Go Noles.